The rope creaked against the cottonwood branch like a prayer wheel in hell. Samuel Garrett had been walking the fence line at first light, checking for coyote damage, when he saw her swaying 30 yards from his cabin, an Apache girl, maybe 16, suspended by her wrists from the old hanging tree, alive, but barely. Her dark hair curtained a face swollen with exhaustion, and carved deep into the bark above her head, still bleeding sap, were the words, "Unforgiven." Sam's hands trembled as he cut her down. She collapsed into his arms like a broken bird, her breathing shallow, her doeskin dress torn and stained with blood that wasn't all hers. 3 arrows jutted from the tree trunk where her head had been, a message meant for anyone who found her first. "Easy now," he whispered, though his own voice cracked like dry leather. "You're safe." Her eyes fluttered open, black as midnight, fierce even in weakness, and she studied his weathered face with the intensity of someone deciding whether to trust a rattlesnake. She spoke no English, but her gaze swept the horizon behind him, calculating distances to safety that didn't exist. Sam carried her to his cabin, a modest structure he'd built with his own hands after the war took everything else from him. The isolation that usually comforted him now felt dangerous. His nearest neighbor lived 8 miles east, and the town of Perdition sat a hard day's ride south. Out here, a man's choices echoed in the wind long after he made them. Inside, he laid her on his bunk and examined her wounds. Rope burns circled her wrists like bracelets of fire. Someone had beaten her methodically, ribs, back, face, with the patience of a man who enjoyed his work. But she was alive, and in this country, that counted as a miracle. As he cleaned her wounds with whiskey and torn cloth, she watched him with those calculating eyes. When he offered her water, she drank deeply, never looking away. When he offered jerky, she ate with the careful hunger of someone who'd learned not to trust kindness. The sun climbed higher, and Sam found himself glancing repeatedly toward the horizon. Whoever had left her here would return to see their handiwork, and when they found an empty tree and fresh hoof prints leading to his cabin, Samuel Garrett would face a choice that would define what remained of his life. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the distant sound of riders moving fast across the desert floor. By noon, the girl could sit upright and speak in broken English, learned from trading posts and mission schools. Her name was Ayanna, Eternal Blossom, and the story she told made Sam's blood run cold as Winter Creek water. 7 white men, she said, her voice steady despite the pain. They take me from my brother's camp 3 days past. Say, Apache killed their friend near Tombstone. Say, someone must pay. She touched the bruises on her face with fingertips that barely trembled. They draw lots. Winter gets to watch me die slow. Sam felt the familiar weight of moral choice settling on his shoulders like a loaded pack. He'd faced such moments before, during the war, after it, in the years when grief had nearly driven him to the bottle. Each time he'd learned that doing right and staying alive rarely traveled the same trail. Did Apache kill their friend? He asked, though he already knew the answer didn't matter. Ayanna's laugh held no humor. My people hunt deer, not stupid white men who wander drunk from saloons. But truth is wind to men like these. Through his window, Sam could see dust rising in the distance. Riders approaching at a steady pace. Not hurried, but purposeful. They knew exactly where to look. You could go, Sam said quietly. Take my horse, head north toward the reservation. I'll tell them you died, that I buried you proper. She studied him with those midnight eyes, seeing something he wasn't sure he wanted exposed. And when they find no grave, when they smell lies on your breath like whiskey, what then, Samuel Garrett? The fact that she knew his name shouldn't have surprised him. In this country, information traveled faster than bullets, and survival often depended on knowing which white men might show mercy and which would kill you for sport. Then I reckon I'll find out what kind of man I really am, Sam replied. Ayanna struggled to stand, testing her injured ribs against the cabin's log wall. In my people's tongue, there is no word for unforgiven. A wrong act lives until it is balanced, but all debts can be paid, even blood debts. She met his gaze directly. What debt do you carry, Samuel Garrett? What makes you willing to die for a stranger? Before he could answer, the thundering of hooves grew close enough to count. 7 horses, just as she'd said. Sam checked his Winchester, knowing 14 rounds wouldn't be enough if these men had come for blood rather than conversation. The riders appeared at the edge of his property line, spreading into a semicircle like wolves cornering prey. Their leader, a lean man with a gray beard and cold eyes, raised his hand to halt the group 50 yards from the cabin. "Samuel Garrett," the leader's voice carried the authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed. "Name's Clayton Wheeler. We're tracking a murderous Apache squaw. Trail leads straight to your door." Sam stepped onto his porch, Winchester cradled casually in his arms. Behind him, through the cabin's single window, Ayanna watched with the stillness of a deer sensing wolves. The 7 riders sat their horses with the loose confidence of men who'd done this before, faces sunburned and hard, hands resting near their weapons. "Ain't seen no Apache," Sam called back. "Been working my fen. See, line all morning. Nothing but coyote sign and old bones." Wheeler's smile held no warmth. "Funny thing about tracks, Garrett. They don't lie like men do. Horse prints lead right to your barn, then stop. Either that squaw sprouted wings, or you're harboring a murderer." One of the riders, a young man with nervous eyes and quick hands, spat tobacco juice into the dust. "Hell, Clay, maybe she's warming his bed." Heard some white men develop a taste for savage flesh. Sam's grip tightened on his rifle, but he kept his voice level. "Mind your tongue, boy. This is my land, and I'll ask you to respect it." "Your land?" Wheeler dismounted slowly, his men following suit. "See, that's where you're wrong, Garrett. This here's justice land now. We got ourselves a murderer to hang, and nothing, not property lines, not foolish sentiment, is going to stop us from seeing it done." The men spread wider, creating clear lines of fire toward the cabin. Sam recognized the formation from his army days, a killing box designed to prevent escape. These weren't drunken cowboys looking for trouble. They were organized, methodical, and completely convinced of their righteousness. "Apache killed Tommy Morrison 3 nights back," Wheeler continued, pulling a length of rope from his saddlebag. "Cut him open like a deer, left him hanging from a Joshua tree for the buzzards. Now, that's what I call unforgiven." He tested the rope's strength with practiced hands. "We caught the squaw that done it, gave her a taste of frontier justice. But the little bitch managed to slip her bonds before we could finish the job." Sam felt Ayanna's presence behind the door like heat from a forge. Every instinct screamed for him to step aside, let these men take what they'd come for, and return to the blessed solitude that had kept him alive this long. Instead, he thumbed back the Winchester's hammer. The metallic click carried across the yard like a death knell. "Well now," Wheeler said softly, "looks like we got ourselves a situation. Stand down, Garrett." Wheeler's voice carried the patient tone of a man explaining simple facts to a child. "You're outnumbered 7-1, and we ain't leaving without that squaw. Don't make us add your name to the unforgiven list." Sam's finger rested on the trigger, calculating angles and distances. He might drop 2, maybe 3 before they cut him down, but that would leave Ayanna defenseless, and these men had already proven their capacity for cruelty. Behind him, the cabin door opened with a whisper of hinges. "I am here," Ayanna said quietly. She stepped onto the porch beside Sam, her injured body straight as a lodgepole pine. In her hand, she clutched something small, a leather pouch decorated with blue and white beads. Her medicine bag, Sam realized. The one thing she'd refused to let go of when he'd found her hanging. "You want me?" she continued, her English precise despite the pain. "Take me. This man has no part in our blood debt." Wheeler's eyes glittered with satisfaction. "Smart squaw. Step away from the rifle, Garrett. Let justice take its course." But Sam remained frozen, staring at the medicine bag in Ayanna's hands. The beadwork pattern triggered a memory. Blue and white diamonds arranged in a specific design he'd seen only once before. On a cold February morning in 1864, when his cavalry unit had been tasked with pacifying a peaceful Apache camp near the Gila River, the memory hit him like a physical blow. A young Apache woman, maybe Tees, Wenty, clutching her infant daughter as soldiers set fire to her wickiup. The baby had worn a tiny medicine bag with that exact beadwork pattern. Sam had been ordered to separate them. Mother to the internment camp, child to the mission school. He'd followed orders, as soldiers do. The woman's name had been Desba, Ayanna's mother. "Your mother," Sam whispered, his voice barely audible. "Desba. She made that bag." Ayanna's composure cracked like ice in spring sun. "You knew her?" "I was there." The words tasted like ashes. "When they took you, I was the soldier who carried you to the wagon." For a heartbeat, the world balanced on a knife's edge. Wheeler and his men watched the exchange with growing confusion, sensing undercurrents they couldn't fathom. Sam felt the weight of 20 years pressing down on his shoulders, 20 years of isolation, of trying to forget faces that haunted his dreams. "I've been unforgiven my whole life," he said quietly. "Maybe it's time to balance that debt." Wheeler's patience finally cracked. "Enough jaw-flapping. Boys, take them both." The yard exploded into violence. Sam's first shot dropped Wheeler where he stood, the bullet punching through his chest like divine judgment. The remaining 6 men scrambled for cover, cursing and shooting wild. Sam rolled left behind his porch railing as bullets splintered wood around his head. Ayanna disappeared into the cabin, but emerged moments later through the back window, moving with surprising speed despite her injuries. While the men focused on Sam's position, she circled wide toward their horses. The battle lasted maybe 3 minutes, an eternity of smoke and blood and desperate choices. Sam's military training served him well, but numbers slowly told. A bullet creased his shoulder, another shattered the porch post beside his head. He was down to his last 3 rounds when he heard the distinct vidua cry of an Apache woman, claiming victory. Ayanna had reached the horses and spooked them with a handful of burning grass from Sam's cook fire. 6 mounts scattered across the desert, leaving Wheeler's men afoot in hostile country, with the sun climbing toward its merciless peak. The remaining gunmen, faced with a long walk back to civilization and no guarantee of survival, began to reconsider their commitment to frontier justice. When Sam offered them their lives in exchange for riding away and forgetting they had ever been here, the deal was struck quickly. As the defeated men trudged eastward on foot, Sam and Ayanna stood in the settling dust, both bleeding, both alive. The silence stretched between them like a bridge waiting to be crossed. "The debt is balanced," Ayanna said finally, touching her mother's medicine bag. "You carried me from one life to another. Today, I carry you." Sam felt something loosen in his chest, a knot of guilt he'd carried so long it had become part of him. "Where will you go?" "North, to my brother's people, but first..." She pulled a small blue bead from her medicine bag and pressed it into his palm. "So, you remember that forgiveness travels both directions." 3 days later, Sam buried Clayton Wheeler beneath the hanging tree and carved a single word into the bark above the grave: forgiven. Years later, when travelers asked about the Apache woman who sometimes appeared at his well during the hottest part of summer, always alone, always welcome, Sam would smile and offer them cool water without explanation. Some debts, he'd learned, were best paid in silence, with kindness offered freely to strangers who needed it most. The desert kept its secrets, but forgiveness, like water in that harsh country, sustained all who found it. Stories like this aren't just told, they're felt. If you felt it too, subscribe and stay with us.